He stood before her, the architect of their perfect life, and with 3 words he demolished it all. "I'm leaving you." Rosalind Hayes felt the crystal glass slip from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor, a perfect, violent metaphor for her heart. She was 7 months pregnant with their son, the heir to the Vance fortune, a fortune her own family had built. But her husband Nathaniel had found a new partner, a wealthier heiress. He didn't just want a divorce. He wanted to erase her, to erase their child. Cast out and penniless, she found an ally in the one man Nathaniel feared most, his ruthless rival, Gideon Blackwood. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's the story of how a mother's love, forged in the fires of ruin, and an enemy's vow born from a forgotten debt, built a fortress around a child that the most powerful man in the city would try and fail to tear down. The chandeliers at the Metamorphosis Charity Gala dripped light like liquid diamonds, casting a golden sheen over the city's elite. Rosalind Hayes, her hand resting protectively on the gentle curve of her stomach, watched her husband, Nathaniel Vance, work the room. He moved with a predator's grace, his smile a carefully calibrated weapon that disarmed competitors and charmed investors. He was beautiful, impossibly so, and for the last 5 years he had been hers. Their life was a masterpiece of curated perfection. The sprawling penthouse overlooking Central Park, the weekends in the Hamptons, the closets filled with bespoke suits and haute couture gowns, it was all part of the Vance brand, a brand built on Nathaniel's sharp intellect and the solid old money foundation of Rosalind's family, the Hayeses. Her father had seen Nathaniel's ambition as a perfect match for the family's legacy. He had mentored the boy from the wrong side of the tracks, given him the capital to start. Vance consolidated and handed him his most precious treasure, his daughter. "You're glowing, darling," a voice purred beside her. It was Beatrice Albright, a woman whose face was as tight as her social circle. Rosalind offered a polite smile. "It's the pregnancy flush, Beatrice, or so I'm told." "Well, you wear it better than most. Nathaniel must be thrilled. A son to carry on the name." "He is," Rosalind said, her gaze finding him again across the ballroom. He was locked in a seemingly amiable conversation with Conrad Croft, the notoriously ruthless telecom magnate. Beside Croft stood his daughter Bianca, a woman who looked as though she'd been sculpted from ice and diamonds. She was laughing at something Nathaniel said, her head tilted just so a scarlet slash of a mouth against pale skin. A prickle of unease, a feeling that had become all too familiar lately, tightened Rosalind's chest. It was the late nights at the office, the hushed phone calls he ended abruptly when she entered the room, the scent of a perfume, not her own, clinging faintly to his suit jacket. He always had a plausible explanation. A deal was closing. A crisis was being averted. You know how it is, Rosie. To stay at the top, you can never rest. And she, wanting to be the supportive wife, the perfect partner, had accepted it. She had pushed her doubts into the dark corners of her mind, focusing instead on the nursery being painted in soft blues and creams, on the tiny life fluttering inside her. Her eyes scanned the room and landed on a figure standing alone near the French doors leading to the terrace. Gideon Blackwood, the only man in New York who could make Nathaniel flinch. Blackwood was new money, a phantom who had emerged from the shadows of Silicon Valley 5 years ago and had been systematically dismantling his competitors ever since. His rivalry with Nathaniel was the stuff of legends on Wall Street. Where Nathaniel was polished charm, Gideon was brutal efficiency. He didn't shake hands. He conquered. He looked different from the photos in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. Taller, darker. An intensity radiated from him that seemed to suck the air from his immediate vicinity. He wasn't smiling or networking. He was simply watching his gaze, a sweeping, analytical searchlight. For a terrifying second, his eyes met hers across the crowded room. There was no warmth in them, only a flicker of something she couldn't decipher. Recognition, perhaps. Or was it pity? She shivered and looked away, feeling as though he had seen straight through her carefully constructed happiness to the anxious heart beating beneath. Nathaniel finally extricated himself from the Crofts and returned to her side, his hand landing on the small of her back. "Enjoying the party, my love." "It's a lovely event," she said, trying to keep her tone light. "You and Bianca Croft seem to have a lot to talk about." A flicker of annoyance crossed his face before it was replaced by his signature smile. "Conrad is a necessary evil, and Bianca is his gatekeeper. It's just business, Rosie. Always business." He leaned in and kissed her cheek, but his eyes were already scanning the crowd for his next target. The kiss felt cold, a performative gesture for the audience they were always playing to. Later that night, as their town car sliced through the glittering streets of Manhattan, the silence between them was heavy. Rosalind wanted to ask about the late nights, about the faint scent of gardenias on his collar, but the words wouldn't form. To ask the question was to be prepared for an answer she wasn't sure she could survive. Back in their penthouse, the silence stretched, amplified by the cavernous rooms and the panoramic view of the city that never slept. Nathaniel loosened his tie, his back to her as he stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows. "The Croft deal is going to be massive, Rosie," he said, his voice distant. "It's the final piece. It will make us untouchable." Us. The word sounded foreign, a relic from a time when she'd believed it meant the two of them. Now it felt like it meant him and his ambition. "That's wonderful, Nate," she replied softly. He didn't turn around. "I need you to understand what's at stake, the level of commitment it's going to take." "I do," she whispered, her hand on her belly. "We both do." For a long moment he said nothing. The only sound was the hum of the city below. When he finally turned, his face was a mask she didn't recognize. The charming husband was gone, replaced by the ruthless CEO. There was no love in his eyes, only a chilling final calculation. The gilded cage she had called home was about to become her tomb. The following week passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Nathaniel was more distant than ever, a ghost in their opulent home. He moved with a quiet, deliberate purpose that set Rosalind's teeth on edge. He was orchestrating something she knew, but she clung to the hope that it was just the Croft deal, the all-consuming business venture he claimed was for them. The illusion shattered on a Tuesday afternoon, the sky outside the color of a dull bruise threatening rain. Rosalind was in the nursery carefully folding a tiny cashmere sweater when Nathaniel walked in. He didn't comment on the room, on the hand-painted mural of a serene forest she'd commissioned, or the small mountain of baby gifts from their ostentatious baby shower. He just stood in the doorway, his custom-tailored suit looking absurdly out of place amidst the soft innocence of the room. "We need to talk," he said. His tone was flat, devoid of emotion. It was the voice he used in board meetings right before he gutted a failing department. A cold dread washed over her. "Okay," she said, her hand stilling on the sweater. "Is something wrong with the deal?" "The deal is fine. The deal is perfect." He walked further into the room, his expensive leather shoes silent on the plush carpet. He stopped by the crib, running a hand over the smooth, polished wood. All of this, it's a complication." "A complication?" Rosalind's voice was a faint whisper. "Nate, this is our son's room, our baby." He finally looked at her, and his eyes were as gray and cold as the storm gathering outside. "I'm leaving you, Rosalind." The words didn't register at first. They were just sounds disconnected from meaning. She stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for the cruel joke to end. But his expression remained unchanged, a mask of grim finality. "What? I'm leaving you," he repeated, clipping each word with brutal precision. "I've filed for divorce. My lawyer will be in touch with yours." Rosalind felt the strength drain from her legs, and she gripped the changing table for support. The room began to swim. For who is it? Bianca Croft." The name tasted like poison on her tongue. He had the decency to look away, his gaze falling on the cityscape beyond the window. "Bianca and I are getting married. Her father has made me a full partner in Croft Telecom. This merger, it's not just business, Rosalind. It's a dynasty." The sheer audacity of it, the cold, transactional nature of his betrayal stole her breath. He was trading their family for a better business deal. A dynasty. What about our family? What about your son? Her voice cracked, tears finally blurring her vision. "The baby changes things," he said, turning back to her. His face was set, resolute. "Bianca's family is particular. A child from a previous marriage, especially one born so close to our own union, would be an embarrassment. A loose end." "A loose end!" she shrieked, the sound raw and wounded. "He is your son. He is a part of you. Which is why this needs to be handled cleanly." Nathaniel continued, his voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial tone, as if he were discussing a hostile takeover, not the fate of their child. "I have a proposal. I'm prepared to offer you a very generous settlement, more than enough for you to live comfortably, to go somewhere new. Start over." "I don't want your money, Nathaniel. I want my husband. I want a father for my child." "You're not listening," he hissed, taking a step closer. The mask of civility was gone, revealing the ugliness beneath. "The settlement is contingent upon one thing. You terminate the pregnancy." The air left her lungs in a single ragged gasp. The room tilted violently. For a moment she thought she might faint. He was asking her to kill their child, to erase the last living piece of the love she thought they'd shared, all for the sake of his ambition. "Get out." She whispered the words, trembling with a rage so profound it felt like it could shatter her bones. "Rosalind, be reasonable. A child will only tie you to a past that is over. This is a clean break for both of us. You can be free." "Get out!" she screamed, snatching a porcelain lamp from the side table and hurling it at him. It smashed against the wall just past his head, the sound of shattering ceramic echoing the destruction in the room and in her heart. He didn't even flinch. He simply smoothed his tie, his expression hardening into one of utter contempt. "I see you're going to be difficult. I had hoped to handle this with dignity." "Dignity? You come into our baby's nursery and ask me to murder him for your career, and you talk about dignity." Her body shook with sobs, a storm of grief and fury breaking inside her. "Fine," he said, his voice like ice. "Have it your way. But don't think for a second you'll get anything from me. Our prenup is ironclad, something your own father insisted on. Every asset, every stock option from Vance Consolidated is in my name. The company was failing when we married. I'm the one who made it what it is. You'll leave this marriage with what you brought into it, the Hayes name and not much else. The penthouse, the cars, the accounts. They are all corporate assets." He was cutting her off completely, stranding her. He had used her family's money and connections to build his empire, and now he was casting her aside with nothing. "My father trusted you," she choked out. "Your father is dead," Nathaniel said with chilling finality. "He made a bad investment. Now I'm correcting it." He turned and walked out of the nursery, leaving her standing alone amidst the wreckage of their future. She sank to the floor. Her hands wrapped around her belly, the tiny, innocent life within her, the only real thing left in a world that had just been stripped of all its truth and beauty. The rain finally broke outside, lashing against the windows, as Rosalind Hayes sat on the floor of a room built for a son who would now never know his father, and wept. The days that followed were a masterclass in systematic cruelty. Nathaniel, true to his word, moved with the swift, impersonal efficiency of a corporate raider dismantling a company. The first notice was an email from the building's management politely informing her that the corporate lease on the penthouse was being terminated and she had 30 days to vacate the premises. The joint bank accounts were frozen, then emptied. The credit cards were declined. The black town car and its driver disappeared. Her world, once a boundless horizon of privilege, shrank to the size of a few cardboard boxes. The society friends who had toasted her at her baby shower now averted their gazes at the few places she still frequented, their whispers following her like a chill wind. She was no longer Rosalind Hayes Vance, the elegant wife of a titan. She was a scandal, a cautionary tale, a woman scorned, and worse, a woman who had been rendered poor. In their world, poverty was the only unforgivable sin. She packed the nursery herself, each tiny outfit and soft blanket a fresh stab to her heart. She was a ghost, haunting the shell of her own life, surrounded by objects that no longer belonged to her. The city she had once considered her kingdom now felt alien and hostile. Every skyscraper seemed to mock her, a monument to the power and wealth that had been stolen from her. Her lawyer, a kind but weary man named Mr. Peterson, who had served her family for 40 years, laid out the grim reality. The prenuptial agreement is a fortress, Rosalind. Your father helped draft it to protect the family assets should the marriage fail. The irony is that Nathaniel has twisted it. He's argued successfully that because he absorbed Hayes Industries into Vance Consolidated and then grew the company exponentially, all assets are now considered his creation. Your father's original investment is a pittance compared to the company's current valuation. So, I get nothing, she asked, her voice hollow. He's legally obligated to provide child support once the baby is born, Mr. Peterson said, a small mercy in a sea of devastation. But Nathaniel is already laying the groundwork to fight for sole custody, claiming you are emotionally unstable and financially incapable of caring for a child. The cruelty was breathtaking. He wouldn't help her, but he would use her desperation against her to steal their son. With the small amount of money she had in a personal account from before the marriage, she rented a small one-bedroom apartment in a dreary part of Brooklyn, a world away from the gleaming spires of Manhattan. The air was thick with the smell of exhaust fumes and street food. The sirens at night replaced the gentle hum of the penthouse's climate control. It was a humbling, terrifying free-fall. She sold her jewelry piece by piece. The diamond earrings Nathaniel had given her for their first anniversary paid for 3 months' rent. Her grandmother's pearl necklace covered her initial doctor's visits for the baby. Each transaction felt like she was selling a piece of her past, of herself. One rainy afternoon, heavily pregnant and emotionally exhausted, she stood in a crowded grocery store, her items on the conveyor belt. A carton of milk, a loaf of bread, some eggs, prenatal vitamins. The total came to $27.42. She swiped her debit card. Declined. A hot flush of shame crept up her neck. She tried again. Declined. The account was empty. She had miscalculated. "Ma'am," the cashier asked, her voice edged with impatience. The people in line behind her began to murmur. Rosalind's eyes filled with tears. She fumbled in her purse, her hands shaking, searching for a few stray dollar bills she knew weren't there. She was forced to leave the groceries on the counter, murmuring an apology as she fled the store, the sympathetic and judgmental stares of strangers burning into her back. She walked for blocks in the rain, not caring that she was soaked to the bone, the feeling of utter and complete humiliation, a cold, hard knot in her stomach. She was going to bring a child into this world, and she couldn't even afford to buy milk. That night, she sat in the dark in her small, unfamiliar apartment, the sounds of the city an oppressive roar. The eviction notice for the penthouse had arrived that morning, a cold official document marking the final end of her old life. She was utterly alone, stripped of her identity, her security, and her dignity. She had reached the bottom. The fall was complete. She held her belly, the baby's gentle kicks a reminder of the one thing Nathaniel could not take from her. He was all she had left. As despair threatened to swallow her whole, she made a silent promise to the son she had not yet met. I will not let him break us. I will find a way. But as she stared out at the rain-streaked window for the first time in her life, she had no idea how. 3 weeks before her due date, the final eviction notice arrived. It was a stark, red-lettered warning taped to her apartment door, a public declaration of her failure. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She had nowhere to go. Her remaining funds were nearly depleted, and the prospect of finding a new apartment in her condition with no income and no references was impossible. She spent the morning on the phone calling shelters, her voice thick with shame. They were all full. As she sat on her worn sofa, the terrifying reality of giving birth on the streets closing in on her, there was a sharp knock on the door. Her heart leaped, assuming it was the landlord or a city marshal. She ignored it, hoping they would go away. The knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. With a heavy sigh, she heaved herself to her feet and shuffled to the door, peering through the peephole. A man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit stood in the dingy hallway. For a moment she didn't recognize him. Then her blood ran cold. It was Gideon Blackwood. Her mind raced. What was he doing here? How had he found her? Was this some new cruel game of Nathaniel's sending his arch-rival to gloat at her ruin? Her protective instincts flared, and she undid the latch, opening the door only a few inches. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. Gideon Blackwood's eyes, the same intense, analytical eyes she remembered from the gala, took in her appearance. Her worn-out maternity dress, the fear in her expression, the shabby apartment visible behind her. He didn't mock her. He didn't smile. His face was a stoic mask. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice a low baritone. "My name is Gideon Blackwood. May I have a word?" "It's Hayes," she corrected him sharply. "And I have nothing to say to you. You're a friend of my husband's." "Your ex-husband," he clarified, a subtle but significant distinction. "And Nathaniel Vance and I are not, nor have we ever been friends. Quite the opposite." He paused. "I'm here because of your father, Robert Hayes." The mention of her father dead for 3 years now was a shock that momentarily disarmed her. "My father." "He was my mentor," Gideon said simply. "When I was 19 with nothing but a half-baked business plan for a software company, he saw something in me. He gave me a small seed investment, not from his company, but from his own pocket. He made me promise to never mention it to build my own name. That investment was the foundation of everything I have today. I owe him a debt I can never truly repay." Rosalind stared at him speechless. Her father had a knack for finding and nurturing young talent, but he had never mentioned Gideon Blackwood. This man, this corporate titan feared by all, was a product of her father's quiet generosity. I've been following what Nathaniel has done to you. Gideon continued, his gaze unwavering. What he's doing is not just immoral, it's a desecration of your father's legacy. Robert Hayes built his company on integrity. Vance is destroying it with greed, and he is trying to destroy his son. Why are you here? She asked again, her voice softer this time. I'm here to offer you a proposition, he said. I want to help you, not out of pity but out of a sense of honor to the man who helped me. I know you're facing eviction. I know your funds are gone. I know Vance plans to sue you for custody the moment the child is born. Rosalind leaned against the doorframe, the weight of her pregnancy suddenly immense. What kind of proposition? I own a secluded estate in upstate New York, fully staffed and secure. You can live there for as long as you need. You will have the best medical care, financial stability, everything you and your child require. You will want for nothing. The offer was so astounding, so far beyond the realm of possibility that it sounded like a trap. And what do you want in return? She asked, her suspicion returning. No one does something like this for free. Gideon's expression remained unreadable. Vance's greatest weakness has always been his pride. He sees his child not as a human being, but as an asset, a continuation of his dynasty. He abandoned his son for a business deal, but the moment that child is born, his ego will demand he possess him. He will try to take him from you. He took a step closer, his presence filling the cramped doorway. My proposal is this. I will give you all the resources you need to protect your child. In return, you allow me to help you raise him. Let me provide him with the security and the future his father has stolen from him. Let me stand as a bulwark between your family and Nathaniel Vance. You want to raise my son? She stammered, horrified and confused. I want to protect him, Gideon corrected. And in doing so, I want to ensure that Nathaniel Vance can never lay claim to the legacy of the man he betrayed. Robert Hayes's grandson will not be raised by a man like that. I will not allow it. It was a strange, almost feudal pact. A deal born of honor, revenge, and the ghost of a man they had both admired. Rosalind looked at this powerful, enigmatic man and saw not a threat, but a potential lifeline. He was offering her and her unborn child a sanctuary. The alternative was the street. She thought of the cold humiliation of the grocery store, the damning red letters of the eviction notice, and Nathaniel's chilling words in the nursery. She had promised her son she would find a way. Perhaps this was it. A dangerous, unorthodox, and desperate way. There will have to be conditions, she said, testing him, her mind slowly beginning to work again. My son will have my name, Hayes, and I will be his mother, his only parent. You are a guardian, a benefactor, nothing more. Gideon nodded, accepting her terms without hesitation. Of course, he is your son. I am simply offering my protection. Rosalind took a deep breath, a shaky, shuddering intake of air. She was making a deal with her husband's greatest enemy and trusting her future and her child's future to a man she barely knew. It was a leap of faith into a dark abyss. But it was better than the certain ruin that awaited her. All right, Mr. Blackwood, she said, meeting his intense gaze. You have a deal. The estate named Blackwood Manor was less a house and more a kingdom carved out of the lush rolling hills of upstate New York. A long winding driveway flanked by ancient oak trees led to a stately gray stone mansion that overlooked a private lake. It was a fortress of tranquility and wealth, a world away from the grime and desperation of her Brooklyn apartment. Gideon was true to his word. He was a discreet and respectful presence. He installed her in a beautiful suite of rooms overlooking the gardens, arranged for a team of the best prenatal doctors, to make house calls and ensured she had everything she could possibly need. His staff were professional and kind, led by a warm but no-nonsense housekeeper named Mrs. Gable. For the first time in months, Rosalind could breathe. She was safe. Gideon worked mostly from a large book-lined office on the ground floor, and their interactions were initially formal. They would occasionally share a quiet dinner, during which he would tell her stories about her father, in his early days, tales of his business acumen, his surprising humor, and his unwavering belief in people. Through Gideon, Rosalind felt a connection to the father she missed so dearly, and she began to see the man behind the ruthless corporate reputation. She saw a man of profound loyalty driven by a strict personal code of honor. As her due date approached, a strange, quiet companionship grew between them. He would find her in the library and wordlessly hand her a cup of decaffeinated tea. She would leave the business section of the newspaper on his desk, open to an article she thought he'd find interesting. They rarely spoke of Nathaniel, but his presence lingered like a poison in the air, the unspoken reason for their bizarre alliance. The night she went into labor, a fierce thunderstorm was raging outside, mirroring the beautiful chaos of birth. It was Gideon who found her breathing through a contraction in the hallway. His composure was absolute. He helped her to the car he had waiting already running, and spoke to her in a calm, steady voice during the drive to the private hospital wing he had reserved. He never left the waiting room. Oliver Hayes was born just as the sun began to rise, the storm having passed. He was small and perfect, with a tuft of dark hair and his mother's deep blue eyes. When the nurse brought him to Rosalind, her heart expanded with a love so fierce and all-encompassing it eclipsed all the pain and betrayal of the past year. He was hers. He was her reason for everything. Later that day, she allowed Gideon to see him. He stood in the doorway of her hospital room, looking hesitant for the first time since she'd met him. He seemed out of place, a titan of industry humbled by the sight of a tiny, sleeping infant. "Come in, Gideon," she said softly. He approached the bassinet slowly, his gaze fixed on the baby. He looked down at Oliver, his stern features softening into an expression of wonder and something else, something akin to reverence. "He looks like you," Gideon said, his voice quiet. "He has my eyes," Rosalind agreed, "but that frown is all his own." Gideon reached out a single finger and gently stroked the baby's cheek. Oliver stirred, but didn't wake. In that small, silent gesture, Rosalind saw the truth of his promise. This wasn't just about revenge against Nathaniel, or a debt to her father. This powerful, solitary man was captivated. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Nathaniel Vance and Bianca Croft were on the cover of Vogue living their wedding, hailed as the society event of the year. The photos showed them in their sterile, art-filled apartment, smiling for the cameras, the perfect power couple. The article mentioned their plans for the future, for the Vance-Croft dynasty. There was no mention of a child. Nathaniel heard about the birth through a private investigator he had hired to track Rosalind. The news landed with a thud in his chest. A son. He had a son. He saw the pictures the PI had taken from a distance, Rosalind leaving the hospital looking tired but radiant, and Gideon Blackwood, his sworn enemy, carrying the baby's car seat with a proprietary air. A black, possessive rage filled him. Blackwood was meddling in his affairs, touching what was his. "What is it, darling?" Bianca asked, walking into his study, dripping in jewels from a party they were about to attend. "Nothing," Nathaniel snapped, closing the laptop. "Just a business annoyance." But it wasn't just an annoyance. It was a seed of obsession. The son he had ordered to be erased was now alive, well, and under the protection of his greatest rival. The existence of Oliver Hayes was a loose thread in the perfect tapestry of his new life, and Nathaniel Vance did not tolerate loose threads. For now he would ignore it, consolidate his power, and enjoy his victory. But he knew with a certainty that chilled him that one day he would come to collect his asset. Back in the quiet serenity of Blackwood Manor, Rosalind watched Gideon hold Oliver, for the first time, his large, capable hands surprisingly gentle. A new life had begun, not the one she had planned, but one forged from the ashes of her old one. A life built on a strange foundation of honor, gratitude, and a shared love for the small boy who slept peacefully unaware of the storm that had preceded his arrival, or the one that was gathering on the horizon. The next 6 years passed in an idyllic quietude that felt both precious and precarious. Blackwood Manor became a sanctuary, a world unto itself, where Oliver Hayes could grow shielded from the identity of his biological father. To Oliver, home was the sprawling estate with its secret gardens and shimmering lake. Family was his mother Rosalind and the tall, quiet man he called Gideon, who over time seamlessly became Dad. Gideon's transformation was subtle but profound. The cold, calculating businessman was still there, running his global empire from his office with ruthless efficiency. But the moment he stepped out of that room, he was Oliver's father in every way that mattered. He taught the boy how to skip stones across the lake, their shared laughter echoing in the crisp autumn air. He sat on a tiny chair at a tiny table for imaginary tea parties, his large frame comically out of place, a serious expression on his face as he inquired about the health of Oliver's stuffed bear, Sir Reginald. He read bedtime stories, his deep baritone giving voice to dragons and knights, his finger tracing the words for the small boy nestled beside him. He never overstepped. He always deferred to Rosalind on major parenting decisions, but his devotion was absolute. He was there for every scraped knee, every feverish night, every triumphant crayon-scrawled picture presented to him as a masterpiece. He was the steady, unwavering rock against which their small family was built. Rosalind, too, flourished. With Gideon's encouragement and financial backing, she went back to her first love landscape architecture. She started a small boutique firm, working from a design studio Gideon had built for her in one of the manor's old carriage houses. Her talent, once a mere hobby, blossomed into a successful business. She reclaimed her independence and her identity not as Nathaniel Vance's discarded wife, but as Rosalind Hayes, a respected designer and a loving mother. The quiet bond between her and Gideon deepened into a profound, trusting friendship, a partnership in the truest sense of the word. The question of romance never arose. Their shared purpose Oliver was too sacred to complicate. In New York City, Nathaniel Vance's life was a mirror image of theirs, outwardly perfect, inwardly hollow. The merger with Croft Telecom had made him spectacularly wealthy and powerful a king in the concrete jungle. He and Bianca were fixtures on the social scene, their lives a glossy performance of marital bliss. But behind the closed doors of their minimalist penthouse, the silence was deafening. Their marriage was a business contract, and it had one glaring, unfulfilled clause and heir. After years of trying of invasive treatments and quiet disappointments, their doctors delivered the final verdict. Bianca was unable to conceive. The news shattered the fragile truce of their relationship, exposing the transactional core. Conrad Croft began to look at his son-in-law with unconcealed disappointment. A dynasty required a successor. It was then that Nathaniel's thoughts began to drift to fixate on the son he had abandoned. The loose end was now a 6-year-old boy. His obsession started small. He paid his private investigator an exorbitant amount of money for updates. First came reports, then photographs. He would stare at them for hours in the dead of night, a glass of expensive scotch in his hand. There was Oliver, on a pony, Gideon leading him, a rare, genuine smile on the man's face. There was Oliver on a swing, his mother pushing him, her face alight with joy. There was Oliver, at a school play, dressed as a tree, with Gideon and Rosalind sitting in the front row, looking for all the world like a proud, normal family. And in every photo, he saw a ghost of himself. The shape of the boy's jaw, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead. This was his son, his blood, his legacy. And Gideon Blackwood was raising him. The thought was a vile poison twisting his pride into a knot of jealous fury. Blackwood hadn't just beaten him in business. He had stolen his son, his very immortality. He started digging using his vast resources to unearth every detail of their lives. He learned Oliver's favorite color blue, his favorite food macaroni and cheese, and that he wanted to be an astronaut when he grew up. He knew the name of Oliver's teacher and his best friend. He became a digital phantom, a voyeur peering into the happy life he had thrown away. The breaking point came on his 42nd birthday. Bianca threw him a lavish party, a room full of people who admired his wealth but knew nothing of the man. As they toasted his success, he saw a new photo on his secure phone. It was of Oliver, a gap-toothed grin on his face, holding a homemade birthday card. The caption from the PI read, "Subject celebrating Gideon Blackwood's birthday." They were celebrating his enemy. His son was calling his enemy Dad. The illusion of his perfect life crumbled into dust. The wealth, the power, the beautiful wife, it was all meaningless. He didn't want a dynasty anymore. He wanted his son. The boy was no longer a complication to be erased or an asset to be possessed. In Nathaniel's warped mind, Oliver had become the prize in the ultimate competition against Gideon Blackwood. And Nathaniel Vance never, ever lost. He picked up the phone and dialed the number for the most ruthless family law attorney in the state. "My name is Nathaniel Vance," he said, his voice cold and clear. "I want to get custody of my son." The legal documents arrived on a crisp October morning, delivered by a stone-faced courier. The sheer thickness of the binder was an act of intimidation in itself. Rosalind's hands trembled as she read the petition. Nathaniel Vance versus Rosalind Hayes for sole, legal, and physical custody of Oliver Hayes. The petition was a work of fiction, a masterpiece of character assassination. It painted her as an unstable gold-digging opportunist who had fallen into the clutches of Gideon Blackwood, a man of questionable character who had insidiously alienated the child from his natural father. It portrayed Nathaniel as the grieving father who, after a period of emotional turmoil following their acrimonious divorce, was now financially and emotionally prepared to provide his son with the stable, loving home he deserved. It was filled with lies, half-truths, and cruel inversions of reality. Gideon read it over her shoulder, his face hardening into granite. "He's not just coming for Oliver," he said, his voice a low growl. "He's coming for everything. He wants to destroy us." The battle that followed was brutal and public. Nathaniel used the media as his personal weapon, leaking sanitized versions of his court filings to gossip columnists. Headlines screamed across tabloids, "Twy Coon fights to reclaim son from billionaire rival." They were portrayed as the villains in his carefully crafted narrative. Nathaniel's lawyers were relentless. They subpoenaed Rosalind's financial records, her therapy notes from after the divorce, her business contracts. They deposed Mrs. Gable and other members of the staff, trying to twist their loyalty into evidence of a conspiracy. They argued that Blackwood Manor was not a home, but a gilded prison, and that Gideon's presence was detrimental to the child's development. The day Rosalind had to give her deposition was one of the worst of her life. For 6 hours, Nathaniel's lead attorney, a shark in a $1,000 suit named Beatrice Shaw, picked apart her life, her choices, her very worth as a mother. Miss Hayes. Shaw began, her voice dripping with condescension. Isn't it true that you were penniless and facing eviction when you accepted Mr. Blackwood's generous offer? I was in a difficult situation because my ex-husband illegally cut me off from all marital assets. Rosalind countered, her voice steady, despite the furious pounding of her heart. So you entered into a financial arrangement with your ex-husband's known business enemy, an arrangement that provided you with a life of luxury in exchange for what exactly? Your son's affection. I made an alliance to protect my child. Or did you sell him? Shaw hissed. The cruelty of the question struck her with physical force, but she met the lawyer's gaze. My son is not a commodity. That's a concept you should discuss with your client. Gideon, meanwhile, was fighting a war on a different front. He used his own formidable resources not to attack, but to defend. His legal team was a quiet army of the best minds in the country. They built a fortress of evidence documenting Oliver's happy, stable, and richly fulfilling life. They had photos, videos, school reports, and testimony from teachers, doctors, and friends, all painting a picture of a cherished and thriving little boy. The climax arrived in the sterile, wood-paneled quiet of a closed-door custody hearing. Nathaniel was there, looking powerful and confident in a dark suit. Bianca, a silent, anxious statue beside him. He took the stand and delivered a flawless performance, speaking of his profound regret and his deep, abiding love for the son he'd never met. Then it was Gideon's turn to be cross-examined. Beatrice Shaw circled him like a predator. Mr. Blackwood, you are not this child's father. You have no biological claim, no legal right. What are you exactly to Oliver Hayes? Gideon looked not at the lawyer, but at the judge. His voice when he spoke was calm and clear, devoid of the anger they were trying to provoke. I am the man who holds his hand when he's scared of the dark. I am the one who cheers the loudest at his soccer games. I am the one who explains why the sky is blue and who listens to his knock-knock jokes even when I know the punchline. You are correct. I have no biological claim. My claim is written in the 6 years of bedtime stories, bandaged knees, and unconditional love. I am his father in every way that counts. I am his dad. The final blow, however, came from an unexpected source. Gideon's lawyers called Bianca Croft Vance to the stand. Nathaniel's team objected furiously, but the judge allowed it. Bianca was pale, her composure fragile. Gideon's lawyer, a calm, methodical man, approached her gently. As Mrs. Croft Vance, in his petition, your husband states his desire to provide a stable 2-parent home for his son. Do you share this desire? Bianca hesitated, her eyes darting towards Nathaniel, who gave her a look of pure menace. She took a shaky breath. I do, she whispered. And do you feel you can provide that stability given the circumstances of your marriage? Yes. The lawyer paused, then placed a file on the witness stand. Then can you please explain to the court the documents I have in front of me, the ones signed by you and your husband retaining one of the top surrogacy agencies in the country, dated 1 week after you learned that Mr. Vance had a biological son?" The courtroom fell silent. Nathaniel went rigid. "Your Honor," the lawyer continued, "Mr. Vance has not been seeking a son. He has been seeking an heir. When it became clear his wife could not provide one, he turned to the son he had previously discarded as a loose end. This is not about love. It is about acquisition." Bianca stared at the documents, then at her husband, and something inside her broke. The years of emotional neglect of being a pawn in his dynastic ambitions, it all came to a head. "He told me," she said, her voice trembling, but finding a new strength. "He told me the child was a mistake. He told me Rosalind wasn't fit. When he found out she was under Gideon's protection, he became obsessed. He said it was the final piece of his collection, that he would own everything Blackwood ever wanted. It was over. The lie was exposed. Nathaniel's carefully constructed narrative of the remorseful father lay in ruins, revealing the cold, grasping ambition beneath. The judge's ruling was swift and scathing, granting Rosalind sole custody and issuing a permanent restraining order against Nathaniel. His visitation rights were suspended indefinitely. He had lost. As they left the courthouse, blinking in the sudden sunlight, Rosalind saw Nathaniel standing by his car. He looked diminished, his power stripped away, leaving only a hollow shell of a man. Their eyes met for a moment, and she felt nothing. No hatred, no anger, not even pity. He was simply a stranger, a ghost from a life that was no longer hers. Gideon put a protective arm around her shoulder, and they walked away, leaving Nathaniel to the ruin of his own making. Later that evening, back at the manor, they tucked Oliver into bed. "Dad," Oliver murmured sleepily. "Did you win your big meeting today?" Gideon smoothed the hair back from Oliver's forehead. "Yes, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We won." He and Rosalind stood in the hallway for a moment, the quiet peace of the house settling around them. She reached out and took his hand. It wasn't a gesture of romance, but of something deeper: partnership, gratitude, and a shared, unbreakable bond. They had faced the storm together and emerged into the calm. They were a family not of blood, but of choice. And in the quiet fortress of Blackwood Manor, they were finally truly home. And so the empire built on lies crumbled, and the family built on love stood stronger than ever. Nathaniel Vance learned the hardest lesson of all, that a child is not a possession to be claimed, and a family cannot be acquired through a hostile takeover. Rosalind Gideon and Oliver proved that the truest bonds are not forged by blood, but by choice, by sacrifice, and by showing up every single day. Their story is a powerful reminder that even in the face of the cruelest betrayal, new beginnings are possible, and sometimes the greatest protector comes from the most unexpected place. What did you think of Rosalind's journey and Gideon's ultimate act of loyalty? Let us know in the comments below. If this story of resilience and unexpected love moved you, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who loves a story of justice, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you for listening.